Hi guys and welcome back to Yashi. Today with a little different video. You saw me talking about inflation in the past couple of months. Today we're gonna go specifically into one sector of inflation, which is food inflation, the cost of prices. We all notice it. You go to a supermarket and you're very angry. $20 cannot buy you pretty much anything. So today we're gonna talk about it. What has been happening, why it has been happening in some sectors of food inflation, and where it will be in the future. As you may know, agriculture plays a vital role in producing the food that we eat. However, various factors such as supply chain disruptions, the war in Ukraine, and many other global issues that are happening kind of affected the entire supply chain negatively, making food more expensive. In this video, we're gonna dive deeper into specifically agriculture of the entire supply chain, as agriculture provides us with the basic food we need to survive. Of course, you have poultry, you have chickens, you have much more, but agriculture is what provides some of the basic necessities. We will also discuss the impact of inflation on different stakeholders in agriculture, from the farmers all the way to the final consumer. And we will also debunk the entire myth about how farmers are taking advantage of inflation to increase prices more than necessary to make a little bigger profit. And we're gonna do this by looking specifically at data. It's understandable then when everything gets expensive, we like to point fingers, especially to the producers, to the creators of stuff, to the people that supply us with things. However, if we look at the numbers in a very detailed way, we will notice that we are not the only ones struggling, and the producers are struggling too. And so by examining facts, we can separate reality with fiction, which is what media likes a lot. Anyway, let's get started. Let's look into numbers. We just mentioned we have food inflation. Let's start with wheat. So we saw the price of wheat increasing a lot. One of the consequences of, for example, the war in Ukraine. Grain and wheat are produced a lot in Ukraine, and it affected the global supply chain. Did it affect the US too? Well, it did. Even though US is pretty self-sufficient when it comes to wheat, we now have to export some of it. Anyway, let's look at data. If we look at pre-pandemic, so 2019, we were at $4 per bushel. Bushel is the quantity that is used to calculate the cost and the quantities of grain, wheat, and many other crops. Fast forward today, we're basically at double the price in just a few years. The number is crazy. Now, what has led to this? We know the war in Ukraine is definitely one of the reasons, but let's look at some basic data first about what impacted the price of wheat farming. And we can see here that these strange names, ammonia, phosphate, potash, these are all fertilizers. One thing that happened during the war, because of the war in Ukraine, is that Russia and Belarus, which were major, let's say, exporters of fertilizers, because of sanctions, either stopped exporting or made it more expensive to export and for us to import. Hence, we see a gigantic increase in prices. And once we will see the breakdown of prices in real numbers, you will understand how much this is affecting production. Another factor here that had a really big impact is the cost of diesel, fuel. We saw gigantic increases in fuel costs last year. Prices have been dropping again. We are at the same levels where we were at the beginning of 2022, so before the war, but prices are still higher compared to 2020 and 2021. We gotta dive deeper now into the actual data. Keep in mind that this government file is from California. I'm gonna use this as a generalization to give you an idea. Even though the prices are not the exact same across all of America, California is more expensive compared to other states, of course. It can give you an idea about the percentages of how much a cost impacts the total cost of a product. We're gonna look at wheat again. However, you can have a whole breakdown for multiple crops. And we gotta look at the scenario where the farmer rents the land and rents the machinery. I know that this does not represent the majority of farmers, but it's definitely the easier concept to understand. Most farmers own the land, many farmers own the machinery. We're talking about 60%, you can Google it yourself too. However, the simpler data to, let's say, analyze is the one where the farmer rents the machinery. So let's get started here. If we look at the operating cost to produce let's say wheat in 1 acre of land, we have of course the seeds and the treatment. That's pretty much fixed, it doesn't move too much. But then again, we have the first cost we just mentioned earlier in this video. Fertilizer, 164. Crop protection, which is chemicals to protect the crops, such as pesticides, 55. Fuel, 45. Machinery operating lease, 25. You can see that across the whole spectrum, prices are not too high, except for these three here. Crop protection, fertilizer, and fuel. These are all costs that increased due to the war and due to the supply chain, let's say, issues we saw in the past couple of years. Fertilizer is coming from Belarus and Russia. Crop protection simply increased because of high demand and a bad supply chain. And fuel increased in general because of the war in Ukraine. Total operating costs are $420 for 1 acre of land. Land cost, which is the rent, and machinery cost, which is the rent again, is $183. And owners, labor and living, $26. Of course, we have then the separate cost of labor hired, which again is per acre, $5, nothing much. Even with a 100% increase, it will come to $10, and again, that's not a lot. So the good thing of agriculture, it is not affected by wage inflation as much as other sectors. Let's go to the profitability. Now, when it comes to profitability, the price that you see here, $10.50 per bushel, is the price that we saw at the end of 2022. However, if we look at the prices today, we are lower than the numbers you see there. I won't calculate this difference in this calculation here. I will keep the numbers we see here. But if you fit in the new price, you will realize that a lot of farmers are operating very close to negative or directly negative. But let's get to it. Price per bushel at the time was $10.50. The target production rate per acre is 64 bushels, which leads us to $670 of revenue, which is all the bushels sold without considering the costs of $670. If we reduce this number by all the costs, the net profit is $42 per acre with the old price. If you add then the new price, I believe that it will be a negative number. This is why agriculture is subsidized by the government, because it can be pretty normal for a farmer to operate at a loss. With that said, with those old numbers here, the old costs, the old prices, we have a net profit of $42, which is a ROI, a return on investment of 6.72%. This number is very important because on average, the stock market, except for last year, but on average, historically, the stock market yields 10 to 12%. So agriculture is not really a profitable business. And when it comes to the increased cost of wheat, we can clearly see that these guys are operating at a very, very, very little margin. They're making little to no money per acre. Now, the only way for them to make a lot of money is that if they own hundreds of acres and work in volume. But per acre, the profit is little to none. So to the people saying that farmers are taking advantage of inflation and pushing prices higher than necessary, well, here you have a proof that what you just said isn't what you believe, what the media says isn't really true. Another thing, we can see some other crops that are already operating at a loss, even with these older prices. 7% loss here, or $44 lost per acre on barley. So there are either little margins, no margins, or even a loss in many cases. What can help us drop prices? Well, as you can, if we go back into the larger costs, the three costs that were affected mostly by the problems in supply chain and specifically the war in Ukraine were fertilizer, fuel, and crop protection. If we look at fertilizers and we look at the 3-year chart, we can see that the price of fertilizer, this is an index that kind of takes all the general prices of fertilizers, puts them together and creates a historical. Historically, we are at a very high point. The index says 177 here, and if we look at 2021 prices, we were at 78, more than half. Supposedly, we would fix the supply chain issue and bring prices back to 2021 levels. Fertilizer costs here would drop by, for example, in wheat, $80. Which would give another $80 profit to the farmer, which would enable the farmer to drop prices and keep the same, let's say, net profit they have now and give the discounts back to the consumer. Fertilizer is one of the things. Fuel costs, we are same levels at 2022. However, if we go back to levels of 2020 and 2021, very unlikely, fuel costs could drop another $10 to $15. Crop protection. If we look at crop protection here, we can see that pesticides exploded in price in 2022. If we look at 2020 levels, we were at 126. This is an index again. Now we're at 177, so less than the historical 200, but still much higher. If we were to go back to a little higher than 2021 prices, we could see a reduction in price of at least 25-30%, which again, translated into the file we just looked at, could lead to an extra discount of $10, $15, $20 too much, but $10, $15, which would lead to a total decrease in cost, production cost of at least $100 per bushel, which can translate partially to the farmers, but also partially to the consumers. We just proved that the fertilizer is the single largest cost in agriculture, and its price has significant impact on the margins of farmers and food producers. The war in Ukraine and Russian sanctions have caused a massive increase in the cost of fertilizer, with prices doubling in some cases. This sharp increase had created a significant challenge for farmers, who are already facing numerous other pressures, such as changing weather patterns and supply chain disruptions. As a result, many farmers have been forced to increase their prices to maintain their profitability or at least stay afloat, which has sort of added to the problem of food inflation. In conclusion, the rumors surrounding the price increases in the agriculture industry are often unfounded. As we have seen in this video, farmers and food producers have been facing a significant increase in fertilizer prices, cost of fuel, and crop protection due to the war in Ukraine, high demand and low supply because of a bad supply chain, and the general sanctions. These price increases have had a severe impact on their margin, forcing them to increase prices to survive. So what is the solution? We have seen world powers disrupt the supply chain when it came to gas prices, bringing them back down. Keep in mind that America is now back to 2022 pre-war levels in terms of gas prices, and we still have Russia not contributing a lot to the whole supply chain of fuel as it did before. So there were some solutions implemented, mostly by tapping into other, let's say, producers or tapping in their own production. I honestly believe we should take similar measures also when it comes to fertilizers, as it is one of the main costs of food, which is the main driver of society after water. Waiting for the war to end is not really a short-term solution, as this thing has been going on for an entire year. What states should do here is either work away with Russia to bring back that supply, or start tapping into their own resources to start producing on their own. Because if you keep on waiting, this will affect our prices for a longer term. By working together and taking responsibility for our choices, we can ensure that everybody has the access to affordable and nutritious foods, even in the face of economic challenges. We saw this with gas, and I feel like we should tap into the same solutions also when it comes to fertilizer and agriculture in general. Guys, this is all. I hope this video gave you some good insights, although the general picture does not look really good. Thank you for watching. If you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. Ciao!